So let's have a look at starting to combine a few layers together to try and get some interesting results. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a double bass sample and a kind of pretty basic wave, like a sawtooth wave from a synthesizer, and start looking at how we can kind of combine these things together, maybe some things to keep an eye out for when you're doing this yourself, or to keep in mind to try and get like the best results that you can. Now, I really like the fact that you can kind of quite quickly kind of carve out the bits that you actually want from your sounds and layer things together very effectively, all just like straight into this interface. So let's start off by loading this double bass bode into the first slot. So I'm just going to load that in. Now let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so first thing is going to want to pitch it down an octave, I think. I'm trying to make a bass, and yeah, let's just go down a little bit. Cool, that's a bit more like the right kind of range, and we're getting all of those really rich, like natural harmonics from the double bass, which is great because, you know, it's just a big wooden resonating box basically, and you get a lot of character out of it. You can kind of see, I mean, we can hear it as well, that the energy kind of builds as the sample plays through. We can see it in our waveform display at the top. You can see how the peak level gets so much louder in the second half. We can also kind of see it on our spectral graph as well. So you can see this kind of fundamental that's like here is there, but not that prominent. So the louder this particular bit of the frequency spectrum is, the whiter it's going to be, like the lighter the color. So you can see at the start it's like just a bit of like a hint of it, but as we go through it suddenly gets much more present. So I would say that we probably want to focus a bit more on this area, just to have a bit more consistency, because otherwise we're going to have points where it sort of feels a bit more hollow, and I don't really want that. I want something that's kind of consistent that I can play. So I'm just going to bring in my loop brackets, roll in the offset as well, so that we're kind of focused here. And let's do a bit of crossfade as well, just to make sure that we don't get any weird clicks and pops. And I'm going to do forwards, backwards up here too. Now that should mean that we now just have this kind of, you know, we're just focused on the bit of the sample that we actually want. Okay, so yeah, we've got like the bit with the high energy in it, which is ideal. Now, I think I'm also just going to quickly do some kind of global settings on the synth as well. So I'm going to set the velocity to 0. I'm going to put it into legato mode, give it a little bit of glide. I usually find, yeah, a bit over 100 milliseconds is usually a good place to start, 120-ish. So now we can kind of move around in pitch a bit more easily. Great. Let's have a bit of a think about maybe adding the other sample, and then we can start looking at the spectrum a little bit and start thinking about which bits we want to keep and which bits we want to get rid of in each one. So I'm going to go over to number 2. And as you can see, I've already sort of selected from the synthesizers sample pack that comes with it, library that comes with it, the Mini Moog Sawtooth Wave. So let's load in that and see how it sounds. Okay, so it's a bit high pitched at the moment, so I'm going to drop that down 12. Great. So the nice thing about this is it is just like a static saw wave. There's no movement in there, so we know we're dealing with something that is pretty flat and consistent. You can see that in the spectrum as well. It's just very, very consistent throughout. So there is a little bit of inconsistencies at the start and the end, which is probably where there's like a little fade or something. So we might as well just grab a chunk. And yeah, let's bring the offset in maybe. We can leave it at the start actually. But let's definitely get a bit of crossfade on the go. And let's see what happens if we just leave it on forwards. Okay, cool. So because it's just a completely static kind of wave, actually we don't need any crossfade because it just very neatly connects to itself. So that sounded much cleaner without the crossfade there. So yeah, so we've got this. This has a very clear kind of low end. It's got very stable harmonics all the way up the range. A little bit different from our double bass, which being an acoustic sound with a lot more variables, I suppose. You know, you've got the way the string is resonating, the way the bow is moving back and forth, and the amount of pressure that's applied to it, and all these things that give you this really nice kind of variation. Now, I would say we've got this harmonic I was talking about here, which is 150 maybe. And we probably want to keep that because that's where a lot of the richness is coming from in our double bass, but we probably don't really need anything lower than that because we can see that we have a really strong fundamental here that we can kind of work with. So let's just solo this for a second, and I'm just going to pick everything from, let's say maybe here upwards. So we're keeping all that top end, but we're just kind of making sure there's no rumbly stuff going on lower down that might conflict in the sub area. We can have overlap in the mid range, and that might actually sound quite cool and help the two sounds kind of blend together, but we don't really want overlap in the sub range. There's just not enough space down there. So we definitely want to pick the sub from one rather than the other. So in this particular instance, I think we should pick the sub from the synth, just because it's so solid. So let's maybe go for these three harmonics down here. Just grab the bottom portion of it, so we end up with something like this. Now hopefully these two are going to connect together quite nicely. Yeah, I mean, it blends them really nicely, and I think partly that's because we've left a little overlap. So this is going up to almost 300 here, and we've made sure that we've got those first three harmonics in there, which are really important for your sub sort of fatness. And then here we've gone from, you know, maybe 100 up or 150 upwards. So there's a little bit of overlap, and that is quite good, to be honest, because it kind of means that those two sounds kind of gel, and the point where it switches from one to another is kind of a bit less clear, which is nice. We want that, I think, because we're almost making a kind of reinforced double bass sample anyway. So yeah, so we've got a good combo here. Now I think we can maybe tweak a couple of things just to make it work a little bit better and sound a bit more usable, I suppose, because it's a little bit soft at the moment. So I think probably let's just turn off retrigger on both of these, actually, just to start off with. So what this is going to do is because we're in legato mode, whenever I hit a new key and retrigger is off, it's not going to like restart the sample, so we're not going to get these jumps. It's going to feel really fluid. And I think because we're working with, you know, a monophonic instrument like a bass, that is gonna just overall help the kind of fluidity of the sound. Cool. So that's the first thing we can do. Now, I think we could probably do with maybe some effects on here as well. So I'm actually gonna, even though we can switch into send mode, this does seem to have a little bit of an impact on running everything through the filter if you want to do that. So if you ever find it's like maybe not quite sending all the layers through the filter properly, it might be because of it being in send mode. But I'm just going to leave it in master mode for now, and we'll see whether we actually end up using this filter. It might be quite fun to get it involved. But I think we're definitely going to just add like a bit of distortion here. So we don't want loads, but I'm just going to turn it up, you know, a reasonable amount for now, so we can actually kind of hear what it's doing and just pop out the distortion settings panel. And I'm just going to kind of flick through and see if I can find a nice setting. The top few are a bit more gentle, and then when you get down to kind of asymmetrical and scream, it starts to get quite intense. So I'm just going to have a bit of a flick through and see what I can find. Cool. So actually there's lots of good options in there, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of really good sounding distortion algorithms that are all quite different, which is great. I mean, that's super useful. You have to remember you have the combination of this sort of distortion amount dial here and the one here. You want to kind of balance the two. This is kind of almost like more like a mix. This bottom one and this top one is more of a like how much you're actually driving it. And then there is this tone balance as well. Now, obviously, with a bass, we don't want to tilt it too far to the right because it might cut out all the low end potentially. Let's just see how that works. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, you know, it does keep quite a lot of the low end in there still, and we can see that in our analyzer just above. So even though there's a bit less low end, it's still there, but we're also getting a lot of this kind of crispy top end, which is great because the sample itself is maybe a little bit dull in the high frequencies anyway. So yeah, so I think that's like a good addition. Now we could add a tiny bit of reverb as well. See if we can find something that's a little bit usable. So I'm just gonna kind of mess with a few settings, maybe turn this up quite high to start off with, and see if I can dial in something usable. We'll probably be shooting for kind of a shorter reverb time, otherwise it will start to get really like soupy really quickly. So yeah, so I'll be pulling the size and the density down and just kind of having a bit of an experiment with that. Cool. It's subtle, but I like it. It just adds a little bit of space, makes the sound feel a little bit more real to our ears because you're hearing a little bit of reflection like you would with any kind of real world sound. So yeah, it just kind of adds a little bit of flavor. So now we could get our master filter involved as well if we wanted to get a little bit of movement going in there. So I turn that on. As you can see, there's quite a lot of different different filters that you can work with. So obviously the sort of the classic is a low pass. And they all sound fairly different. So we could maybe have a bit of a low pass movement. So there's quite a lot of cool stuff you can get out of that. I like how well the filters really handle the resonance being pushed. I mean, this is res up to max basically, but because it's pre distortion, the distortion has a really nice effect of kind of, in a way, almost softening up that resonance spike a little bit. And then because we've got the key tracking, which by default is turned to 100%, if you find a spot like I found there where it kind of brings out a really nice harmonic, it's going to track that up and down the range as you play different notes on your keyboard. So that sounds pretty great to my ears. Now there's, there are some other ones you could experiment with. High pass is going to be a bit less useful for a bass, probably. Band pass, maybe, if you wanted to have a load of kind of sub coming in and out type movement. Peak might be quite useful, just so that you're not really cutting anything away. You just have like a boost somewhere. So it has a little bit of a different character to the low pass. I think I prefer the low pass a little bit because it's changing the overall sound like a little bit more as you move up and down the range. I feel like there's just a little bit more variation there, which is nice. So yeah, we've got like a really cool sound already. Now we haven't even got into any kind of modulation stuff, and we will do more of that as we work through more patches. But even without getting into that, we've already managed to get quite a cool sound with a nice amount of kind of movement and instability to it. That is kind of almost like a bit of a best of both worlds thing, because we have the stability in the low end of a synth. But we have all this subtle kind of harmonic movement from like a real instrument, which when you then run it into distortion, it gives you this nice kind of timbral variation as you hold down a note. It's not just staying the same. Those little variations in kind of sonic energy as you run it through a distortion are going to give you all these really nice kind of like microdynamics and changes where certain harmonics might pop out at some moments and then different ones at other moments. So you can really see how powerful it is, like combining even two quite different types of sound sources together, and it's like really quick and easy. I mean, obviously I'm taking a little bit more time because I'm explaining it, but you could do all of this in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It wouldn't take you very long, and you've created something that's quite complex and quite interesting.